Hello guys, welcome to episode 4 of this Vue course. In this episode, I want to add the first, functionality, let's say, to be able to add employees using our backend API. So if you have watched the previous episode, you already know that we wrote the code to fetch some employees from our backend API. And now we want to add the next feature. So adding employees. Now we're fetching employees, but how about, adding employees to our backend API? So this is the topic of episode number 4. But before we get started, let me show you the changes that I have made to the application off screen before starting this episode. So if you remember from the previous episode, we had some errors because we had created, pages and components that we were not, that we hadn't developed, but we were importing inside of the, application. So I removed them, but I will create their files when we want to develop them. Right now in main.js, this is the routing in place. Inside of index.js, I have commented out add employee. I'm going to uncomment this, by the way, in this video because we're going to develop this. And I have commented out these two because add employee and edit employee were not available. And then inside of app.view, previously we had the hello world component. I removed the hello world component and I am importing the home page that we have developed, or the home view. And I am, showing this here, right? So that means that right now we have our, let's say employees coming from our backend API. I have my API running as well. And for each employee, we're getting an edit link as well as a delete button. And now we will be writing the add, employee page. Right now, when I click on add employee, nothing happens. The reason is that inside of index.js, we have no route, for this path. We do not have like a page, right, for this /add route. But when we develop the add employee page or component, we are going to, uncomment this and of course this, and then we will be able to navigate to that, portion of the application. So again, in this video, we're going to introduce new concepts. I don't want to talk about the things I've already discussed with you in the previous episodes, but I am going to talk about the new, topics that we need to understand when developing the add employee, page. So yeah, that's it. And I'm gonna, by the way, create a new, branch. Let me create a new branch for episode number 3. So in episode number 3, I am going to say add home view and routing. Okay, so this is what we did in episode 3. Now let's create episode 4 branch. Okay, now by the way, I am going to delete this branch because I don't need it. So episode number 4, this is the branch via state of the application. I told you what I have done off screen. Now we can continue talking about the add employee page. So this is a page. It's going to allow the user to add a new employee by entering the details of an employee, and that employee will be saved to the backend API, and then the user will be redirected back to the home page. So right now the landing page of the application, or the root, is rendering the home page. We defined this here. So we said when the user navigates to the root of the application, just render the home page. And inside the home page, we have this heading, employee list, right? And then we have this router link for adding a new employee that we're gonna, develop. And then we have this UI. And inside each LI, we have a router for editing and we have a button for deleting that we are, handling with the code inside of the script block. Now, the add employee, view. So again, take a look here. We're creating a form. We're handling the submission of the form using this function add employee, and then we're creating some inputs, and we're using the model, which is something that we need to talk about in this video. We are kind of binding these inputs, right, to these, let's say, properties inside of our component. So let's talk about these a little bit before I implement this inside of our application. So form @submit.prevent add employee, this prevents the default form submission. The default behavior of a form is that when you submit the form will be submitted to the backend, to the server, and the page will reload. So the default behavior is reloading the page. But when you say submit prevent add employee, it means, okay, prevent the default behavior, which is reloading the page, right? And call the add employee function instead. And then we're creating inputs using vModel. We are, binding these inputs to name and position. This binds the input fields to reactive variables. We need 2 reactive variables probably inside of the script setup block. Any input from the user, right, updates the corresponding reactive variables in real time, like two-way data binding. And then the button, which is of type submit, and of course it's going to submit the form, but the form is not going to be, posted to the server, and the page is not going to reload because we're preventing that we're preventing that from happening. So it triggers the form submission logic. Now, we have used vModel. vModel, as I told you, two-way data binding. So getting the value inside of the reactive variable, showing that value inside of the inputs, and then putting the value inside of the inputs into those reactive variables, two-way data binding, something like ngModel in Angular, right? So then we have submit prevent. So it's a modifier to prevent the default behavior of your form submission, and then we're handling the form submission using the function that we have developed. So let's talk about these a little bit. So submit prevent, it is handling form submission without the default behavior, without page reload. What it does, @submit listens for the submit event of the form, which is going to happen when you click on that submit button. Then when you say .prevent, this is a modifier, right? It is called a modifier. So it prevents the default behavior, which would normally refresh the page. Why it matters? Because in SPAs or SPAs or single page applications, we usually do not want the form to cause a full page reload. We want to handle the form in the front end, in client side. So instead, we handle the form using JavaScript. For example, we send some data to the backend. For example, take a look here. We've got the form. We've got submit prevent, handle submit. And here, we've got the handle submit function. And we have an input which has been, bound to this, variable. I'm sorry, to this variable, to this name reactive variable. It is an empty string, and whatever you input into the input, element will update the value inside of this name variable. And of course, when this name variable changes, the value inside of the input will change. So these two are bound to one another, two-way data binding. And the button, as you can see, it's going to submit the form, and the form submission is going to be handled using this button, using this function, and this function is going to do a console log. And we are importing ref because we want to create a reactive variable. So without the prevent, without the modifier, it means that the page would reload when the form is submitted. Now let me create the page, add employee page, and then we will continue talking about the two-way data binding a little more. So inside the views folder, I'm going to create this add employee view, and then I'm going to write the code for the template section. We're going to have an h2 and the form, and then the input using vModel, two-way data binding, to two reactive variables called name and position. and then the template is going to get closed, right? Let me snooze my code completions. Now, remodel, two-way data binding between the input in our template and the data inside of our script block. Vmodel creates a two-way binding between a form input and a data property. It means when the user types in the input, the data inside your script block, inside those reactive variables are updated automatically. And when the data changes in your JavaScript by, for example, fetching something from the backend API, the input in your template will again update automatically. So take a look here. We've got this input, two-way data binding to this variable, to this reactive variable, which has initially it is being set to an empty string, and then whenever you enter something here, this will get updated, and whenever this gets updated or gets changed by, for example, some function or some value coming from the backend, the value inside of this input will change. And here we are using this notation to kind of render the value inside of the email reactive variable. We have a similar thing in React and Angular. Sometimes it is called interpolation. It is a sort of, binding, some type of binding, which is not two-way data binding. It is like a one-way data binding. You are only showing the value inside of your reactive variable here. You're not updating the reactive variable based on the changes that happen to the data in the template. So this is like one kind of binding, let's say one-way data binding, sometimes even one-time data binding, but vmodel, two-way data binding. So as the user types in the input, the value of the email is updated in real time, and any use of the email in the component like the p tag updates too. So yeah, we talked about two things, right? @, submit.prevent, and vmodel. This is used to listen for form submission events and prevent the default behavior of a form. This is used for two-way data binding, binding input fields inside of your template to your reactive variables and vice versa. And yeah, as the use case, this is used for handling the form submission, and this is used for keeping the data in sync. Now we need to write the script setup block. Take a look at this. I told you we're going to need two reactive variables, name and position. Initially, they're set to an empty string. We are importing ref to create our reactive variables. We're importing Axios as we want to communicate with our backend API, and we're importing router because we want to route the user after the user has created an employee. This is the router. We're going to use this router, right? Now, we have a function called addEmployee. And if you remember, the addEmployee is used here. When you want to handle the submission of the form, you use this addEmployee function. And this addEmployee function, as you can see, is communicating with our backend. And then it is sending this object using name and position keys. And the values are the values inside of your reactive variables. So whenever you want to set a value to your reactive variables, you use dot value. And when you want to read the values inside of them, again, you use dot value. And when you send your employee to your backend, then you use router.push / to navigate to the root of the application. And as we know, the root of the application will render the home page, right? So let's get to this. I'm gonna go to my addEmployee page, and I am going to create the script block. So importing ref for creating the reactive variables, Axios for backend API integration, router for routing. We're going to create the two reactive variables, name and position, then the router, and then the addEmployee function, which is going to send a post request to our backend using the two reactive variables, and then push / to the router, which will get us back to the home page of the application. So right now we need to go to index.js. We need to uncomment this code, this line of code, as well as this one. So right now we are importing the addEmployee component, and we are creating this route. That means that when the user clicks here, take a look at the route, which will, show up at the bottom of your browser. It says /add. So /add means add employee page here. And the add employee page is the component that we just created. It contains a form, a heading, and this is the logic, right? So let me click here. Why doesn't it take me to the add page? Let me go to my console to see if I've got any errors. No match found for location path edit. That is for the edit, but I'm talking about the add here. Okay. Let me do something. Let me stop the application and run it one more time to see if I can get this fixed. No, it doesn't work. Let me investigate this off the screen, and then I'm going to share the fix with you. So I found the issue. It was a silly mistake that I'm going to, tell you about the fix. So inside of app view, previously we were explicitly rendering the home component, right? But this is not the correct way to do this if we want the router to be able to get us to another page or another view, like for example, add employee in this case. So instead of explicitly importing the home and rendering it here, which of course makes this add link non-functional, we need to render router view. So router view means that whatever is the result of that route, which for example in this case, let's say is the home component, because inside of our routes we're setting route to home, right? Render it here in the place of router view. So right now, because we're at the root, home component or home view will get rendered. Now, if we want to, add a new employee, we need to click on this add new. And add new, based on the routes that we have developed here, will render the add employee page that we declared and developed here, right? And because inside of app view we're using router view will take a look at our route, which will be a slash or /add, and it will understand that /add means rendering the add employee page, and it will render the add employee page like this. And then we will be able to, let's say, enter the information for a new, let's say, developer. I'm going to call this John Smith, which is a front-end developer. And then I click add. And when I click add, if you remember, here we're going to navigate the user back to the home component. And inside of the home component or home view, we are going to see John Smith, the new developer. So yeah, that was the reason why we were not able to navigate to the, add new page that we created. So with that out of the way, let's get back to the node and let's talk about this briefly. So using ref, we declared reactive variables. We declared two reactive variables, name and position, to store user input. Use router, composable function from view router to programmatically navigate after form submission to the home view or home page. We use axios.pay post to send a post request containing the information of an employee, and we use router.push to get user back to the home page. Now, right now, this is the workflow of the application. The user fills out the name and the position of an employee. Then they click on the add button, and then the data is being sent to this endpoint using a post request. New employee is added to our backend API using JSON server, and then the user is redirected to the root of the application, which is going to show or render the home view or homepage. And that's it for this episode. Right now, we have kind of implemented two of the CRUD operations, getting employees, right, as well as creating new employees. We still have to talk about deleting employees and updating employees. And of course, through implementing these two new features, there are so many other new topics and concepts that we need to understand, learn, and talk about. And that is going to happen in the future episodes. Thank you so much for watching this episode till the very end. And if you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, please, and stay tuned for the next one.